My grandfather was humiliated in front of everyone. What the hell's angels did brought the city to a standstill. No one imagined that a simple act of cruelty would awaken something so grand. What began as a public humiliation transformed into a lesson in respect that marked everyone who witnessed that day. But you will understand why, only at the end. My grandfather was always a simple man. One of those who wake up early, drink strong black coffee, and go out into the street with the same worn-out hat as always. He never needed much, only respect. And perhaps that's why that day hurt so much. I still perfectly remember the sun beating down on the square, the children running around, and him there sitting on the sidewalk trying to sell some wooden toys he made in his spare time. My grandfather used to say that each toy carried a piece of his soul, and that as long as someone smiled with one, he would still have a reason to continue. But the world doesn't always value those who do good in silence. It was then that a tall man, the owner of a new shop that had opened on the corner, approached him. His tone was gruff, full of arrogance. He said the old man was getting in the way, dirtying the entrance to the shop, scaring away customers with all that old junk. People in the square started to look. Some laughed, others pretended not to see. And I stood there, speechless, watching my grandfather being humiliated in front of everyone. He tried to explain calmly that he only wanted to sell enough to buy his medicine for the month. But the man pushed his box of toys, which fell, scattering everything across the sidewalk. The sound of the wooden toy cars hitting the ground still echoes in my head. It was there that I felt something inside me break. And if you've ever been through something similar, you know what I'm talking about. A mixture of anger and helplessness that consumes you from the inside. If you also think that nobody deserves to be treated like that, leave a comment saying, "Respect above all else." Sometimes we need to remember that there are still people who care. That day I took my grandfather home in silence. He didn't say anything, just stared at the ground. That night I saw him sitting on the porch, running his hand over the broken pieces. His gaze said it all. The next day he didn't want to go back to the square. He said maybe it was time to give up. That's when I arrived at the workshop where I work, and one of the guys noticed my silence. They're members of the Hell's Angels, people with tough appearances but giant hearts. One of them asked what had happened, and when I told him, the whole place went quiet. The leader, a man named Rick, just lit a cigarette and said, "Nobody disrespects an honest man in our town." I didn't need to say anything more. The next day, early in the morning, I heard the sound of engines echoing down the street. When I looked out the window, I could hardly believe it. Dozens of motorcycles parking in front of that man's shop. People started coming out of their houses, curious. The noise of the engines seemed to announce that something big was about to happen. The shop owner came out hurriedly, frightened, and saw the motorcyclists get off in silence. None of them said anything. Rick was holding something in his hands, the old pocket watch that my grandfather had repaired many years ago. He looked at the shop owner and said in a firm voice, "Do you know what respect is?" Meanwhile, the others began cleaning the sidewalk. They applied fresh paint to the wall, placed flowers, and hung a handmade wooden sign. "Respect those who built the path you walk on." My grandfather, who was watching from afar, couldn't hold back his tears. The whole town gathered to watch. The people who had laughed before were now filming and applauding. If you had been there, I'm sure you would have felt your heart ache too. Leave a like if stories like this still touch you. It's not about the number. It's to show that empathy still exists in the world. The shop owner, confused, asked the reason for all this. Rick stepped forward and replied, 40 years ago, this man repaired this watch for me. I was just a penniless boy, and he didn't want to charge a cent. He said time is worth more than money." Rick opened the watch, showing its restored interior, and added, "Since that day he taught me what true value is, and you treated it like trash." The silence that followed was heavy. The arrogant man didn't have the courage to answer. He just lowered his head, ashamed. My grandfather tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. Rick approached and placed the watch in his hands, saying, "You gave me time. Now it's our turn to reciprocate with respect." At that moment, people began to applaud. It was as if the entire square had stopped in time. The noise of the engines mixed with the applause created a scene that no one there would ever forget. That day wasn't about motorcycles, jackets, or strength. It was about dignity, about remembering that every man who has made it this far has a story. When it was all over, Rick put his hand on my grandfather's shoulder and said, "You're not alone." After that, they got on their motorcycles and drove away slowly, leaving a beautiful silence in the air, as if each engine roar carried a piece of gratitude. My grandfather stood there, looking at the new sidewalk, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in a long time, he truly smiled. And if you've made it this far, it's because you believe respect is a serious matter. So subscribe, not for me, but to spread more stories like this. Because the world needs to remember that sometimes the loudest noise comes from the silence of those who do good without expecting anything in return.